Well, we're going to be doing something a little different today. Something a bit painful. In order to do the special effects makeup that I've been wanting to do, the best way to do it is to have a life cast done. And I'm going to make one myself. What we're going to do is we're going to live cast my face, and then we're going to go back, and then we're going to live cast my neck and my shoulder, chest area. I think any of the prosthetics that you make, or latex, or anything like that you may buy or make yourself, can easily be done on flat surfaces. So whether or not I do the neck area, it just really depends on how painful this is going to be. And I'm going to be straight up honest about that part, because several things that I've read, saw, it's just, no matter how the way you spin this is about to be painful. But the first thing we have to do is slather my face, hairline, eyebrows, everything. I have to slather in petroleum jelly or Vaseline, whatever. I have to get pretty much coated in it. So I'm taking a few moments to get a little bit of vape, to actually get the plaster on my face. And what I'm using is I'm using plaster gauze. And plaster gauze is essentially what it sounds like. It's gauze, and you can see it's got it's the holes. It's the thread. It's basically cross-threaded, and it's got a very thick layer of plaster of Paris on it, or plaster of Paris on it. And when you moisten it just a little bit, it turns into what you would use for paper mache. Now, am I entirely sure this is safe to use on skin? I know most plaster gauze is. Did I purchase the stuff that you're supposed to use on your skin? God, I hope so. I looked everywhere, and supposedly this stuff you can use on your skin too, so we're going to see how this turns out. After everything is said and done and I finally get this mask off my face, we're going to have a semi-beautiful cast of my face, and we're going to fill it with plaster of Paris. Now, I could have gone with cement, but I figured, hey, if this thing breaks, I don't want it to be, too expensive to have to redo. So I'm going with typical plaster of Paris, and then we'll be coating it. So, let's drink up a little bit, because I'm going to be completely covering my mouth. Oh, wait a minute. That means, I gotta pick my nose here a second. That means I gotta get rid of this nose ring. Yeah, I know, it looks like I'm picking my nose. Ow! A little bit of maneuvering to get it out. There we go. There we go. And guys, I don't go without my nose ring very often, okay? I may have pierced my nose by accident, but I love my nose piercing, so that's got to go. We'll be back. Everything that is up to my bandana here, I am absolutely slathering in Vaseline, because if any hair happens to get caught in this plaster mask that I'm going to be wearing, it is going to rip bald spots. And I'm trying to make sure that I get my eyebrows really good. And I'm using a paintbrush because it feels like the bristles are actually able to dig it into the hair. And I know like hell I've got fine little baby hairs all over my face. Yeah, I thought so. I ain't got it on my upper lip yet. You've never felt anything weirder until you try to slather your face in petroleum jelly. I do facial treatments on my face, like masks and stuff like that, but nothing compares to trying to slather Vaseline all over the place. It just feels weird. If it wasn't for the fact that I'm not 100% sure how good this stuff is for your pores, considering it is so goopy and gunky, I'd say just go try it for fun, because it ain't fun. Although my cheap brushes, because I just bought cheap brushes in order to do this Vaseline thing for both my face and the inside of the plaster mask. They're kind of losing their bristles. But I am going further with the Vaseline line than I am going to be going with the plaster, in hopes that it'll help it come off a little easier. Look at me, I'm all shiny. I am sufficiently covered in Vaseline, I believe. Now let's go back and pick off the paintbrush. Okay. That's covered. Now it's time to get real nasty. Alright, so what we're going to do is I'm just going to take one of the larger strands first. I'm going to start lining my forehead with it, and we're just going to dunk it in a little bit of water. We don't want it to be too sopping wet, because if it's too sopping wet, then it'll start running into my eyes. So we're literally just going to like place it right on the forehead. And as soon as you start rubbing, the plaster starts bonding together. And I did cut some relatively thin and thick strands, so we can do different portions of my face a little easier than others. Okay. To be truthful, that wasn't very painful coming off. It was weird. It was like a giant suction cup. That honestly just felt interesting. Now, what we do have to do now is we have to go back, and if you hold it up to the light, you can actually see small holes inside that were not sealed properly. So that's what we have the extra strips for. We're going to go back on the outside and try to fix them. So I'm actually going to point the camera down this time so you can actually see what I'm doing, and seal what I wasn't able to seal before, because the inside is perfectly shaped. So now the outside doesn't really matter. And the eye sockets and nose need to be covered as well. So I'm going to clip off some little squares. Okay. Now that needs to dry a little bit, so I'm going to allow it to dry before I actually try to cover it completely. But I am going to try to push it out just a little bit because my nose is not absolutely flat. There we go. Now for the eyes to do the same thing. Now I'm going to try and finish up the neck a little bit because it looks like I stopped a little short, but luckily it's not going to take a whole lot to fix that. I'm just going to take one strip, and I'll show you exactly what I'm doing. is right here, where I basically brought it down my neck. I'm going to just basically make a cover for it. I guess I just put just enough Vaseline all over my face that it kind of just popped off. That, and I made sure it wasn't completely and totally dry before I popped it off. Alright, now we gotta do the same thing with the edges too. And if you're trying to do this at home and you do happen to find that your plaster is not smearing well enough, just dampen your finger in the bowl a little bit and it'll help with moving the plaster around. Now that the plaster mask is no longer on your face, you don't have to worry about it dripping or oozing or smearing anywhere. You're just trying to get the holes to fill properly so that way you can pour the plaster in without worrying about it pouring out of the mask. Alright, now it's time to go over the nose and the eyes again since we filled those holes. And at this rate, your plaster mask really should start looking like something from The Mummy. Because like I said, at this point you're filling holes and building up the outside to make it strong enough for the plaster to actually hold the inside without it breaking your mask. Okay, so now in order to create a base for me to actually hold this for, to create any of my prosthetics, I'm basically going to take a solo cup and just prop it up underneath the chin area, and I'm going to start building up around this. Okay, so now we have got the complete mask with the handle that I've made, which essentially is a very small cast of my neck, since I only casted down to bottom part of my chin. We have filled in all of the holes that we could find, so now we just have to wait for it to completely harden. So let's start the clock, especially now that I can vape again. Alright, so this is actually 48 hours later, and it is hard, completely and totally. But now, before we actually put the plaster in, hold on, I gotta get hair out of my nose. Oh yeah. Well, actually I don't have to. The Vaseline, you slathered all over our face. Now we gotta put it all in our face. Huh? Yeah? Okay. Yeah, not funny. I thought that was gonna be funny. It didn't come out funny. So we literally have to cover every nook and cranny inside of our mask, and I've already gotten started. And you just want to make sure that it's completely coated, because once the plaster of Paris actually gets into the mold, obviously it's just going to seal itself to whatever it can touch. So just like you did with the plaster of Paris gauze that I put all over my face, you want to make sure everything's covered in the Vaseline. And since I think I actually have this covered, and I'm just using the cheap brush that I used to plaster this all over my face, I'm plastering it on the inside of my face. Yeah. I'm just trying to go back and make sure that there's no like massive mound buildups of Vaseline down in the nose cavity, because that seems to be like the hardest part to reach, is down inside the nose cavity. And making sure that I didn't miss anything. And by the look of the lighting, you can pretty much tell. Well, I know you probably can't because the lighting in here really is bad. But you can pretty much tell by shining the light around of where you've missed putting Vaseline at. And like I said, the nose seems to really be the hardest place to really reach. But I have managed to get Vaseline all over the inside of this thing, or at least I hope I have, So now I'm going to rest that right in there in my little, let me show you, inside of my little makeshift holder thing. So now we're actually going to mix, I guess you would just call it industrial plaster of Paris. Pick it up Lowe's, Home Depot. I actually happened to find it at Hobby Lobby, which was, I mean not Hobby Lobby, Michael's, which was actually odd because this is the same stuff you put on your walls. So if it breaks, it's cheap to replace it or remake it. And I've already got, and you have to mix it with cold water. And this is the first time I'm opening them up, and I'm just really hoping that I don't breathe on it and like make it go poof everywhere. Come on, let go of the tub. Okay. Now I'm going to use a spatula. And don't ask me what kind of spatula this is. All I know is I found it in my drawers and I claimed it for my craft stuff. So, and the same with the measuring cup. It just seems to be well enough that it should work. And I don't know if you have to pack it, but this is my first try doing this. So I'm just going to kind of lightly make a full cup. I lost count. I hope to God that was 3. Probably should have measured it out like before I did this, but hey, I'm only human. Now I just gotta mix this crap up. I'm trying to get this mixed as well as possible. It says to mix it at a ratio of 2 to 1. I'm not using a full 2 to 1 ratio because I do want to be able to knock any air bubbles out of the cast that may rise to the surface. And I've worked with DAP plaster before, and it tends to be exceedingly thick, and you won't be able to knock any air bubbles out of it. There is plaster that you can use for making this kind of mold, but I figured DAP, if it broke or if it didn't turn out right, I could at least redo it at a very, very, very cost-effective manner. DAP is really cheap. It comes in large barrels, small barrels. Actually, there was another 2 sizes bigger than this, and this is 4 pounds. 4 pounds of plaster powder, and you mix it with cold water. And I'm not doing the full 2-to-1 ratio because, like I said, I want to be able to manipulate the bubbles out of the cast. But I do still want it to have some thick consistency. Okay, so now that we have our soft ice cream putty in our face plaster mold and attempt to keep cats away, we play the waiting game again. Okay, so now it's time to actually get the mold out of our cast. And I hope I didn't wait too long, because you're not supposed to let these things completely dry inside of the cast. Ah, it's actually not going to be as hard as I thought. Now my eyes do look funny, but I am not a sculptor by any means. And now comes our most important part, because everything is completely dry. No, you can still see the lines in the face and on the sides. So no, it's not perfectly smooth. So considering the fact that I made this at home, it's not absolutely perfect, but to be fair, neither am I. And in order to seal it, I'm going to be just using a matte finish Mod Podge. And I absolutely love Mod Podge. I really do. This is like one of my favorite crafting adhesive sealers, you know, kind of things to use. I love Mod Podge. I've used Mod Podge on several projects, and this crap is great. Not just as a sealer, but it also works kind of like an adhesive too. So when you're actually working with this, don't do what I'm doing. Wear gloves. And I'm using just a spongy brush, because with these little divots that I showed you earlier that are in the chin, I'm going to be filling them with the Mod Podge, like so. And I'm going to literally plug up the little holes. Just kind of dab it in there, and then spread it around. Now, the trick with Mod Podge is you put it on in very, very thin coats. Why do you put it on in thin coats? Well, if you worked with crafts before, then you know that Mod Podge takes a little while to dry. Okay, so if you've never worked with it before, listen to me now. Do it in very, very thin coats. I made a Christmas gift by hand for my grandmother a few years ago. Actually, it was probably about 4 years ago now. I ended up doing it with very thick coats because it was my very first time using Mod Podge. And it took 3 days for it to dry. And still to this day, keep in mind what I just said, I made this thing for her years ago. Still to this day, the squares that sit on top of the platform that I made for her still adhere themselves to each other. So since I'm using Mod Podge in order to create a seal for this cast, whatever I put on it, I don't want it to seal itself to the cast. Now, you can use wood glue. I believe that you can actually get something specifically for plaster in order to seal it, but I don't know a whole lot about, you know, house remodeling, and that's technically what I'm using here is a plaster that you would use to redo your walls. I know I just had to go through some house remodeling, but I don't really know a whole lot about it, so considering the fact that I'm using DAP plaster, there probably is something that you can use to seal it properly. But I'm using Mod Podge because that's what I have on hand. I'm literally just going over this thing, filling every nook and cranny. Make sure you get right in the crevice of the nose. Make sure you do the lip line very well. You want to make sure everything is sealed. And as you continue to build up, because I'm going to probably end up putting like 5 layers of sealant on this, so it has a very nice slick surface to work with. Well, not slick, but an even surface to work with. Hello, Jordan. You're going to troll the video. Okay. You're going to want to make sure you have a very nice, even, flat coat to work with. And even if it's not 100% flat, that's fine. Because, like I said, you're going to be using your cast to put stuff on it in order to make molds or prosthetics to stick on your face. So that means you're either going to be putting gelatin directly onto it, or you're going to be using air dry clay, you know. So the surface doesn't have to be absolutely pristine, but you do want it to be sealed enough that you're not going to damage the cast itself. And just for safe measure, let me move you around here so you can actually see. I'm actually coating the back side of my cast so that way the back of it will not fall to pieces over time. Now, unfortunately, because that was the rough side that I didn't really pay any attention to, this side might be a bit more difficult to actually get coated. But I'm coating it so it doesn't get all crumbly and stuff like that over time. But like I said, I made it with the DAP. The DAP plaster, so that way it'd be cheap and easy to replace if something ever did actually happen to it. So I'm just coating the back of it so that way it's nice and sealed all the way around, a nice 360 or 180 in this case. And now, after everything is completely dry, even though the eyes still look a little weird, but that helps me, you know, kind of figure out exactly where the eye sockets are at because they're kind of square. But now that everything is completely dry, the Mod Podge is dry, the front and the back are completely sealed, and we have ourselves a life cast. And I can do whatever on this thing. So many ideas come to mind now. So many ideas come to mind. Oh, God, there's been the fun I can start having now. Yeah, I've been waiting so long to get me one, and now I finally have one. Look, I can pick my own nose. Isn't she pretty? Mwah! We finally have our life cast done. Even the bubbles feel smooth now because the Mod Podge fell into the holes and we created a smooth surface over it. But it did not mess with the details of the lip line area or the nose. I did leave the square patches in the eyes for the purpose of actually figuring out exactly where the eye socket sits, where the eyeball would sit. But we still have our brow line. We still have a very clean nose line, tip and side crease of the nose. And of course, that's not really a good cast of my neck. It's more or less something for me to hold on to, but it is a good starting point, especially considering I have the underside of my chin actually done. That's pretty much where my neck starts, right here, and then I just kind of, you saw the solo cup thing that I did. So we have our live cast, and now we've got so much fun that we can have with sci-fi makeup. Sci-fi makeup. Special effects makeup. Yay! Alright guys, I will be getting back to you with another video, and as always, I love you. Bye.